Welcome into CBS News 24/7. I'm Elizabeth Cook. We start this hour at the Supreme Court, where arguments just wrapped up on the case challenging the Trump administration's efforts to end birthright citizenship. That is the 14th Amendment guarantee granting citizenship to children born of parents who are in the U.S. temporarily or are undocumented. Now, though the court is not being asked to rule on the legality of birthright citizenship itself, this case is bringing protesters out today, among them members of Congress.
They are challenging the ability of federal judges to issue nationwide injunctions. And like I said, when a bill like this came to our committee, like I said on the floor, if you don't like all the nationwide injunctions that have been issued against the Trump administration, then stop doing illegal, unconstitutional stuff.
Okay, let's bring in CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford, who's been following the arguments heard today. Jan, to be clear, this case is more about the power of judges and those nationwide injunctions that we've been talking about. So what have you heard from both sides?
Well, you know, as you said, I mean, what we've seen here are these challenges across the country to President Trump's executive order that would really scale back automatic birthright citizenship in this country, which is considered historically a bedrock principle going back almost, 150 years. So 3 judges decided that they were going to apply their rulings nationwide, not just to the parties that were in front of them, the people who were challenging the lawsuits in their courtrooms. They were going to apply them to everyone across the country, every single person. And that's the issue here. Do judges have that kind of power? The Trump administration is arguing that they don't under the Constitution, that one federal judge can't dictate national policy. But the people who are challenging birthright citizenship say that is ridiculous, because this is the exact kind of case where you need to have a nationwide ruling. It's a national issue. You're going to have people in different states having different rules for U.S. citizenship, and that makes no sense. So it's totally inefficient, they say, if everybody should just have to go sue on their own, file lawsuits across the country and courtrooms across the country. And I think the justices today, after over 2 hours of arguments, were really struggling with how to work their way out of this one, Elizabeth. I mean, I think clearly there are 5 justices, a majority, who would like to end nationwide injunctions. They think that they're inappropriate, they're unnecessary, there are other ways to go about guaranteeing people's rights, and that is not it. The question is, how are they going to go about doing that? How are they going to write that opinion? It's going to be fascinating to see kind of whether they're able to. Maybe they're going to ask for additional briefing in this case. We don't know. They're going to go back and they'll vote. They'll all now have a private conference and they'll vote on this. And then the majority, who's ever in the majority, they'll start trying to write that opinion. And sometimes they can change their mind. So this is one that I'm not going to say coming out of it what's pretty clear what they're going to do. They may not even know yet how they're going to resolve this.
Yeah, it sounds very complicated, Jan. But I'm curious, can you break down what a favorable ruling for the Trump administration in this case could look like and what it could mean?
Well, I think one way out, that if Trump is to win, what the justices and a majority of the justices would say is nationwide injunctions. And again, President Biden tried to end them. President Obama hated them. It's not a partisan issue. Nationwide injunctions with one judge kind of setting policy for the country are inappropriate. You have to stick to the parties before you. But there are other ways to go about it. And I think the court could then suggest, let's try, what about class actions where people can come together as a class and challenge those? So that would be a way of covering everybody without it applying nationally in the way that the judge would do as an injunction. Now, one of the justices, Justice Alito, said, well, what's the difference? But Justice Kavanaugh, another conservative, said rules matter. Rules matter, and the way we go about doing things matter, even if functionally it's the same thing. Functionally, it would protect people if they filed it as a class action. It's the same thing as a nationwide injunction, but it's a proper way of going about doing it. So that may be the way they end up resolving this at the end of the day. But again, this is not one I'm going to say with confidence, oh yeah, it was clear they're going to do this.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch this process, Jan, because there are other legal challenges against the Trump administration. And I'm curious if this particular ruling is going to have an impact on those other cases, even though they might not have anything to do with one another.
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. There have been now one more. We've been saying 39, but since the Justice Department filed that in some of their papers, there have now been 40 nationwide injunctions entered in cases that now one judge has blocked some of President Trump's policies, and they run the gamut of some of these executive orders. It's not just on this specific issue, birthright citizenship. So this has been very frustrating to President Trump as he's issued all these executive orders. That's why he's trying to put a stop to it. Like I said, President Biden didn't like nationwide injunctions either, and the court didn't deal with it then. So now they're I guess feel like they've got to take it up. But yeah, you're absolutely, as Elizabeth, this could have a widespread application. And then finally, the merits. We're talking about they're not deciding the merits of birthright citizenship. I think they're going to have to do that at some point, and it may not be that far off down the road. I mean, there is a chance that after they sit around and talk about this amongst themselves, that they will come back maybe tomorrow, maybe one day next week, and say, you know what? We may need to look at the merits of this, and so you need to file additional court papers, or maybe we'll have another hearing. That's also possible. I'm not saying they're going to do that. There's just a lot of things I think they have to work out now, how they want to go forward.
Yeah, it's unclear what they're going to kind of come up with this ruling, or when they write this opinion, Jan. But do you have any kind of clue of how long it's going to take, when we might have an answer?
I mean, the court. That's also, I hate to say this, and because normally you can read things, I feel like I can read things pretty well. This could be an opinion, or maybe it would be an order. I mean, how they issue this one could matter in terms of the timing. My guess is we will have an answer by the end of June. That's the last day of the term. But how soon between now and the end of the term we would hear something from them? We just don't know yet. And again, the reason for that is that they don't know yet. They don't know how long it's going to take. There will be dissents. They're not going to be unanimous on this. I can be pretty confident about. And so those decisions where you've got different people who have different points of view and want to write a dissent, those things take longer. So this could be another, month or 6 weeks away before we hear something.
It was interesting to hear the justices' questions to the different attorneys on both of their arguments, and that was kind of interesting to see where their heads were at when it comes to this particular decision. Jan Crawford, thank you so much for joining us. Always great to see you.